Joe Rogan reacts to secrets of ancient Egypt's Great Sphinx. Egypt's Sahara is historians' favorite place to be. The place is filled with sand, tombs, and mysteries. The limestone statue with eyes peering out of what looks like an almost human face has buried hundreds of mysteries. Joe Rogan was enthralled when he got to know these secrets. So, what secrets are we talking about? Let's get to know more about it. Hello and welcome back to the Abandoned Archaeologist again, the channel to learn all about ancient archaeological findings. Today we'll discover the secrets of ancient Egypt's Great Sphinx and how Joe Rogan reacted to them. But before we begin, to get your attention, we have a question you can answer at the end of the video. Which part of the Great Sphinx is in the British Museum now? Write down your answer in the comment section and see if you got it right. Here we begin. The Great Sphinx of Giza is a limestone statue of a mythical creature with a human head and the body of a lion, Sphinx. The giant statue faces directly from west to east and stands high in the Giza Plateau on the west banks of the Nile in Giza, Egypt. The secret of the Great Sphinx. The Great Sphinx of Egypt remains an enigma after witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations. Nevertheless, the statue has stood the test of time, and many historians argue that the limestone statue is older than it is assumed to be. Therefore, the first mystery to solve is the time it was built. Many historians propose the idea of eras of construction. According to them, there are eras of construction in Egypt, and some structures, including the Great Sphinx, are far older than we think. For a long time, Egyptologists and archaeologists have thought that the Great Sphinx is more than 4,500 years old, but recent studies show that the structure is much older than what traditional Egyptologists and archaeologists believe. The ultimate riddle for humans to solve is, when was the Great Sphinx built? The Joe Rogan Podcast. Robert Schoch, Associate Professor of Natural Sciences at the College of General Studies, Boston University, was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Both personalities discussed Egyptian history and the mysteries of the Great Sphinx. The debate regarding the construction of the Great Sphinx between mainstream archaeologists and the new wave of independent thinkers is not new. Independent thinkers believe that the Great Sphinx is much older than what the archaeologists believe. Robert Schoch, the guest on the Joe Rogan Podcast, is an independent thinker who believes the latter, but he said, not everything is always the way people say it is, even if they're quoted from authorities. According to mainstream archaeologists, the Great Sphinx was built in 2558 and 2532 BCE. However, the first person to raise questions about the age of the Great Sphinx was John Anthony West, an American writer and independent thinker. His question about erosion in the early 1990s paved the way for the entire Sphinx controversy. He was intrigued while reading the works of R.A. Shawala de Lubitz, an early Egyptologist and mathematician with westbound references to water erosion on the Sphinx. However, John Anthony took the scientific community by surprise when he claimed that the Great Sphinx was carved around 10,000 years earlier, even before Egypt was a desert. The factor of erosion and change of mind. John Anthony West argues that academia has overlooked the factor of erosion. The body of the sculpture shows distinct markings of water erosion, which was unfortunately ignored by academia. Robert Schoch uncovered his journey with John Anthony West to Egypt and challenged traditional beliefs in the now viral podcast with Joe Rogan. He said that when he first traveled to Egypt in 1990, with John Anthony for the first time, he thought it was a simple case. He thought he would prove John Anthony was wrong and walk out in minutes. But little did he know that he was about to change his beliefs. Robert Schoch is a man who is willing to pursue an open-minded investigation. He is curious not only about the origin of the Great Sphinx, but the entire region of Egypt and its implications for humans. Nevertheless, he initially believed in the academically approved date of origin. He explained about the first time he ever saw the Great Sphinx. He knew something was wrong with the period it was believed to be built. There was no connection between the academically accepted date of origin and the giant limestone statue staring him in the eye. Robert Schoch revealed in the podcast that he changed his mind in literally 30 seconds. Upon intense examination, Robert realized that the Sphinx had witnessed the worst of the worst wet weather conditions over the centuries. Furthermore, the wet weather condition witnessed by the Great Sphinx drastically differs from today's hyper-arid weather conditions in Egypt. Robert Schoch also noticed refacing work that had been form-fitted to the eroded blocks behind. The blocks were from the previous kingdom involved in the refacing work, but one would wonder why the refacing work is necessary in the first place in less than 500 years. Some old Egyptologists had suggested that the Great Sphinx might have been older than the pyramids, just by the feels of it, without any evidence in the early 19th century. Buried in sand and restoration work. The counter-argument of mainstream archaeologists is that the limestone used to build the Great Sphinx has deteriorated rapidly, hence the refacing work became necessary. Let's assume their argument is true. Even if the limestone deteriorated and with rapid speed, the Great Sphinx would have disappeared around 5 centuries ago. Some scholars believe that the New Kingdom workers have used the blocks from the causeway to Khafre's pyramid, which would be Old Kingdom blocks, to reface the Sphinx. However, one simply cannot verify if this belief is true. The generally accepted fact about the Great Sphinx is that it was buried in sand from approximately 2150 to 1400 BC. It was later discovered and repaired in various periods of history. The restoration work of the Great Sphinx is one major part of its history. The work is divided into 6 phases, from the 18th century to the present. Throughout history, humans have made significant efforts to conserve the glory of the Great Sphinx. Weathering caused little erosion between 1400 BC and the present, but the restoration work dating from 1400 is substantial. The 2 great questions. The great question raised by observing all these factors is that if the structure was built in 2500 BC and spent most of its time under the sand, how did it erode so much? In addition, if the Sphinx and the tombs around it in the valley are made up of the same rock and built in the same period, then why is the erosion of the tombs not similar to the erosion of the Sphinx? Furthermore, unlike the Great Sphinx, the tombs show mild wind-blown sand weathering that one would expect in the Old Kingdom monuments. Erosional features of the Great Sphinx. The main reason people subscribe to the possibility of the Great Sphinx in the older theory is erosion features. Robert Schoch revealed some of the features in the Joe Rogan Podcast. According to the research of Manishev and Parkhimenko, large water bodies have partially flooded the Sphinx and thus creating wave-cutout hollows on its vertical walls. One particular erosional mark appears in the hollow of the Great Sphinx and supports this theory. It is because the vertical fissure appears exactly at the water level of the early Pleistocene age. With this evidence, geologists concluded that the statue was already on the plateaus of Giza by that time. One more astonishing claim made by geologists is that the Sphinx could be 8,000 years old when the Mediterranean Sea extended to Egypt and the Giza Plateau. The distinct marks on the statue caused by seawater lapping against it for thousands of years makes sense now. The old rock, new statue theory. Some people believe that the rock might have been touched by the Mediterranean Sea. This is because they believe that the Great Sphinx is a statue carved in an old rock, and hence the theory suggests that the rock is ancient, but the statue is relatively new, and according to them, the Nile could be raising floods. Robert doesn't subscribe to this theory. According to him, the flood marks raised by the Nile would be different compared to the precipitation and rainfall runoff. Let us know what you think about the date of origin in the comments. And the answer to the question we asked earlier is beard. The British Museum is home to a portion of the beard that was once set on the Great Sphinx's chin. So make sure to like and subscribe to never miss an update.